Hello and welcome everyone. Welcome to Workplace at the River, where we empower lives at the workplace. My name is Joel and I'm part of the team at Workplace at the River. And I'd like to welcome you to our final COVID-19 survival series. For those of you who have joined us for all the COVID-19 survival series, why don't you give yourselves a pat on the back, or you can do a reaction, just give yourself an applause. Good on you. Good to see all of you joining us again. Today we've got a very interesting speaker, but before that we would like to play a simple icebreaker with all of you. So if you can go to your browser, log in to menti.com, key in the code and put this down. Name one person you are thankful for during this MCO or MCO period, all right? And it must be a real person, all right? So do drop in your details and I'll join you back shortly. All right, thank you so much for participating in that. I see a few names. I see Workplace at the River a few times. I see Pastor Lee Chu a few times. And I saw one of my own name. So I'm thankful for my wife who's listening in today. So I'm so glad that all of you have joined us this evening for our final Workplace at the River COVID-19 survival series. Don't worry, we will carry on with the business talks. I will give you more details about that later. But today, it's a very interesting talk because today we're doing something very different. As you can see, there is a chat function that is enabled. There's a chat box. So do log in from a computer, get a headset on so that you can have the best audio experience, so that you hear myself, the moderator, and definitely the speaker that's going to come up soon. And if you could help us, just continue to be muted. If you're accidentally unmuted, just mute yourself. All questions will be taken through the chat box as well as our tiny.cc link, which I'll share with you later. So do respond and do comment, do thank the speaker. This may be new for us. We're trying this as well this week. So even as a speaker speaks, don't be afraid. You can say, thank you for speaking. That was great. Give him a thumbs up. Give him a clap, that'll be great. Also, if you've got any questions for the speaker, do drop it at the link tiny.cc/askwater and go ahead and ask all your questions. And we will do our best to cover all the questions this evening. Without further ado, I'd like to welcome our speaker for today. His name is Christoffer Erichsen. He's the founding partner of Human Inc., and he's going to be our speaker for tonight. And he is going to talk about the topic empathy in action, using design thinking to drive post-crisis growth. So what is design thinking? What is empathy in action? Let's find out more. Over to you, Chris.
Thank you so much for the great introduction, Joel, and really appreciate the invitation to join. And thank you for everyone who's signing in and spending your evening here with me. I have a very exciting share with you around this question around what does empathy actually mean at work, and how might it help us in this kind of COVID and hopefully post CMCO situation that we will hopefully be in very soon next week, depending on the updates from the government, of course. A little bit about myself first. So as mentioned, my name is Chris. I hail from Denmark, so you can see the Danish on the screen, hopefully in a moment. Also, I'm not sure why it's not showing. Here we go. I'm also been living in Malaysia for almost 14 years now. So nasi lemak is one of my favorite Malaysian dishes. When I'm not working on corporate innovation and helping businesses to drive customer-centric innovation, I'm also a big music lover, so I have my DJ equipment over in the corner here in my home office. So that's kind of a big passion of mine. In terms of what we do, the real purpose and the reason why I started Human Inc. as a founder is really that I wanted to see a shift in business, from business just being about making money to business serving humans to create a better world. So we really work with these large organizations typically to help them discover new ways of working, new ways of practicing, new ways of doing business that put people at the center, both their employees and importantly also their customers and partners in value chain. The way we do that is kind of in three ways. So you can imagine we typically work with boards and C-suites around innovation in terms of strategy. What does innovation really mean? But also, if you want to be an innovative company, what kind of culture will enable innovation? Often large companies have a little bit dysfunctional culture that is killing innovation, where there's too much control and bureaucracy and fear. So how do you shift from that kind of old culture to the new culture? But also from a product portfolio or services, customer experience standpoint, what are the new experiences that would delight your customers, and how do you change your old services very quickly as the world is changing very quickly? We work with clients in a vast range of industries, banking, airlines, insurance, IT, actually many different industries. For you, I guess I understood that many of you are either professionals or maybe work in an SME or business owners yourself. Doesn't really matter, even if you're young students, doesn't really matter. I think this question is important for anyone today, is really what is the way to show up? How can you in a way have more empathy with the world? And maybe even if you're feeling that it's tough enough to be you, how can you actually also care about other people? And how can you use that for business? And are there ways that you could do that more than just being a nice guy or a nice girl? And design offers you a simple and proven framework and toolkit to help you do that, also known as design thinking. So I'll be sharing a little bit about the why first, then a bit about what is design thinking then. And most importantly, probably at the end of the webinar here in the next 20 minutes, a few quick tips how to get started. So why is empathy so important? You can say that many organizations have had to respond and defend themselves against the fact that customers are buying less or not buying at all. So how do you preserve cash? You need to cut your costs likely. How do you even deliver your services? How do you work from home? Can you still be productive doing that? Those have been a lot of the questions that a lot of us had to face very quickly, and have done very well doing so, I think, in most cases. But on the other hand, you can say that there's also the question of kind of the moving from, I'm sorry, the slides are changing here a bit, moving from kind of just defending the business to actually going on the attack and saying, in a positive sense, to saying what are actually the new opportunities. If people are not traveling so much, could that be an opportunity for us? If people are not eating out so much, how can we then serve them? If people want to buy things digitally, what does that mean? So this is in a way where you can say understanding the emotions and the sentiment and the behaviors and what's driving your customers' behavior now, and maybe even in the future, making some qualified guesses about where your customer is going to be 3-6 months from now. Exactly, we need to get into fight mode. We cannot just defend only. That's not how you win in football. That's how the Danish football team plays, and that's why they never win. I'm not sure about Malaysia, no comments. I think you can say that one of the key ways that you can be on the offense or in the attack is really to understand your customers. And what's interesting is that when you look at this question around customer experience, actually 86% of buyers are willing to pay more for brands, products, services where they have a great customer experience. So they're willing to pay for more quality, you can say. At the same time, we know that about half, if 1 out of 2 customers would be making what you can say impulse purchases, things they didn't plan, they didn't budget, but now I was in the mall or now I was on this Lazada website or whatnot, and I just clicked, oh, I'm gonna buy this. So if you create a great experience, you can also get people to spend more than they were planning to do. Last and maybe most scary, you can say that it's only 1 out of 26 of your customers that's gonna tell you if you suck and if you have a bad experience. So people are so polite and nice that they're not actually gonna tell you directly, but they might actually gossip and tell everyone on Facebook or Instagram. So it can still hit you very much, and they might just basically leave your website and not even complete the purchase or never come back to your restaurant, or depending on what you do. So experiences are really created through our senses, And we can in a way think of business as theater, that our business is showing up on the stage and the customers are showing up on the stage. And how do we create a great story for them, a great experience that's meaningful, relevant, enjoyable, maybe even surprising, delightful. Oh, wow, you thought of me, or thank God you made a mistake because now I got upgraded or given a voucher. So how can we in a way understand our users' expectations? If you can imagine the green line here being everything you expect when you engage with a company. But what if that company only gives you a much smaller value and a poor experience of getting that value? So that kind of gap, that negative feeling, you can say pinning kepala, I think it's called in Bahasa, that pain in the neck, is really interesting from a business standpoint, because if we can understand that pain, then we can also find ways to solve for it and come up with a more relevant solution. And that's really where empathy plays such a big role. It may sound very soft and kind of cheesy in a sense, that should we have empathy in business? It's about money, production, etc. But actually, if we can truly understand what's going on for our customers, and we can almost connect with that feeling of how it feels to have a healthcare problem, how it feels to be worried about your weight, maybe here after MCO, I know I am, but also being scared about, I don't know if I want to join a gym and I'm going to be the fat one in the gym, for example. How would that help us if we run a gym to maybe become relevant again? Maybe we don't need to run a gym. Maybe we need to help people do exercise at home, for example. So this is why empathy is so critical in business, because it helps us understand and address users' needs so that we can design and innovate and deliver more relevant solutions and experiences. So you can, for example, see, and many of you have probably experienced this, that during the MCO and CMCO, restaurants were only allowed to open for a certain number of customers. We need contact tracing. We need to be able to clean our hands. We need to worry about all the surfaces. There's a lot of things that restaurants have to do by law, but maybe some of you have already been out and experienced that it's not quite the same going to a restaurant as it used to be, and that maybe some of these protections are actually making it kind of difficult having a conversation, a bit awkward when you're meeting there with the friends for the first time, etc. So how can we get more empathy with the experience of the customer to both be compliant but also thrive as a business? So now I would actually like to ask you guys to put in a little comment in the chat. I think it's up in the right corner, to kind of answer the question best you can. What changes have you seen in customers or users' needs or behavior or way of thinking, acting in the last couple of months here during the COVID crisis? Have you seen any changes? What are they not doing anymore? What are they doing different? Is there something they're saying? Have emotions changed? Are they spending more or less on certain things? So maybe we can just take a few minutes to kind of get some input on that. And I'm going to see if I can see the chat here. So there's an expectation of responsiveness, Reynolds Lee is saying, and Joel, you're saying people are looking for more online of everything. Absolutely correct. Let's maybe hear a few more comments. Ben is saying businesses are spending more digitally, website, social. So maybe if you're in the provider of those services, maybe business is going up. If you're not, maybe you're suffering. Very good. Maybe we can get a few more examples. I see here. More examples are coming in. So please don't be shy. It could be anything. It could even be inside your company. Maybe you have noticed behavior change amongst colleagues. Kevin is saying people are cautious with, people are cautious with spending, only spend on necessities. Absolutely. More food delivery, huge take, low touch. Dave Ho is saying, Joel is saying people are holding back spending because they don't know if they still have a job. So something completely different from, let's say you run a restaurant, is now affecting the restaurant, that your customers are worried about job security. Are reluctant to meet in person, so it's hard to get meetings if you normally do your PD, like we do, meeting up over coffee or tetarik. That can be difficult. Hygiene awareness is another one. Increased need for connection. So how can we actually connect despite the fact that we are not physically together? For example, my mom is in Denmark. People care less about how they dress. Yeah, thanks for noticing. But also that we have more of these Zoom meetings where people are sitting in shirts and boxer shorts and flip-flops or whatnot at home, right? So the whole work environment has changed. Expectations for freebies. So since everyone is struggling to get business. Maybe some companies are taking advantage to say, can you give me something for free first? We're certainly seeing some clients doing that. Right? And these are good examples of how changes in the world directly affect your business. And if we don't have empathy with these changes, we're not going to be relevant to our customers. So I'm just going to go back here out of the chat, but please keep adding and we will kind of revisit this. So you can say that now you can see how important it is to have empathy in this sort of situation. Maybe we can look a bit at what is actually design and how does it help. So please put, if you have any questions as I'm sharing out, please put them in the chat and we will revisit it during the Q&A. So what is design thinking really? You can say the definition of design is the transformation of existing conditions into preferred ones. So making something better in simple English. So you could say maybe the user need that the founders of Grab cleverly discovered was that it was actually very painful to get a taxi back in the day. I'm sure you can remember. And by building a solution that built on existing technologies like GPS, maps, mobile, 4G, etc., it was possible to create a two-sided business model between drivers and people who want to hail a ride. So this is an example of a good kind of empathy with a user who's trying to get something done. I want to move from A to B, but also they discovered that there were other needs that you maybe didn't do very well with the taxi. Maybe you were worried for your daughter going to school or coming home from the gym late at night. You wanted to worry about safety or payments. Maybe if you don't have cash with a taxi, you had to stop by an ATM. So they actually were very clever at researching and using design thinking to actually discover a lot of these needs. So what is design thinking really? It's in essence a simple process with some steps that I'll show you in a moment. Each of these steps have some tools. We're not going to go so deep into all these tools today because we don't have so much time. There's some techniques, you can say, some ways that you can find out more about customers, develop ideas, and test them quickly. And deep down, it's a stupid, naive mindset that if you believe you can make the world a better place, if you believe that you can make your services better, then you're right. And if you think it's hopeless and impossible to innovate, then you're also right. And some companies still struggle with that mindset a bit. So you can say in essence that it's a creative problem-solving methodology that drives innovation and customer experience by understanding users at a deeper level. So design thinking is also known as human-centered design. It focuses on the user, not so much on the money, not so much on the technology at first, but really understanding what people want and then figuring out what technologies can deliver that experience, what methods can deliver that, and how we can make money. The beauty of it from a business standpoint, because of course some of you may ask, yeah, that sounds great, Chris, but how does it make money? When you look at companies that use design thinking, they are interestingly also the leading companies inside the S&P 500, which are already globally awesome companies. I would love Human Inc. to be part of that one day. But basically the companies that use design outperform the average S&P 500 by 219%. So there's a huge return on investment in terms of building capability for design. And design is not only something you do for your logo or your physical product. It can be service design, how you design an airport, how you design a restaurant to be COVID compliant and safe, but also enjoyable. It can be used for redesigning your strategy, or we're not meeting the targets, what are we going to do with the rest of the year? It could be the question around working from home. How do we create a delightful experience despite the fact that we're not together in the office or we're just about to come back? But it could also be process that you want to make better, cheaper, and more effective. Of course, digital is a big play here because more and more companies need to digitize, like Joel said. So it's not just doing the old thing on your website or inside an app, but really figuring out what are people trying to get done and what are the simplest click path, the simplest screens, the simplest experience that really resonates with your users. So like I said, typically in business, we focus on the money and then the technology. And finally, marketing, can you make it look nice? Customer service, can you clean up where we made any mistakes? But what we're doing in design and design thinking is really asking the big questions about what is desirable for customers? How can we make it feasible technically to deliver on those needs, on those expectations, and create a great experience? And when we do that, how can we make it viable? So that's in a way the sweet spot of that any innovator needs to figure out, is pulling these three circles together. And we do that through 3 simple steps that you can start using right after this call or maybe tomorrow. Understand first, really understand your customers, talk to them, get ideas based on what you learned, and quickly take action to try out something. Don't take forever to perfect something. test it very, very quickly the next day, the next week, to really get more understanding and better ideas and better action. So you typically, it's not phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, but more like a cyclical, iterative way of working. So this is really where you can say empathy is built into this process, because often bosses will say, can you build such and such a thing? Can you run such and such a campaign? What if we had that offer? Would we get more business? But often they want that result. They want growth, which is understandable. That's what business is also about. But unless you have a deep empathy and understanding, you're not going to be effective in doing that. And you're going to come up with ideas that are very similar to your competitors. So in a little bit more detail, you can say that the understand step, the empathy step, is really about understanding who are my users, what matters to them in this particular situation. And as they use our services, will their needs maybe change? Once you've done that, then getting many ideas, often bringing a few colleagues together, physically or virtually, to generate many ideas, and then to quickly, in a democratic fashion, voting on which ideas we think are most feasible. We can list some criteria for that, and then do the voting. And once we have an idea, we're not going to have a long planning and think tank and commission. We're basically going to quickly visualize these ideas in a very imperfect way, maybe sketching it just on a post-it note and going out and talking to 5 to 7 users to quickly get some feedback from them. Then maybe we get new understanding, better ideas, we can test again. So in a matter of days or weeks, we can have a concept that has been tested with customers before we even engage anyone to change how the restaurant is laid out or how our website is working, or whatever it may be. As a case study, maybe I can ask again, you can put in the chat, do you know what this is? Anyone know can tell me what is this? See in the chat. We have a few very clever folks here. Maybe you are either you have used one, or maybe you work in healthcare. So I have a few answers here. Reynolds Lee is saying it's an MRI, CT scan. That's absolutely correct. So this was basically a very creative solution built using design thinking. And it was built by this guy called Doug Dietz, who works in GE Healthcare. And he noticed that basically it was basically all MRIs were doing more or less the same. And basically all these scanners were looking the same. And the problem they had was the kids were scared to use them. So they had to actually forcefully sedate them, which added cost and of course was unpleasant for families and kids and healthcare providers. What they did was, from these observations, using empathy and this understanding, they got the idea that what if we can make it look like a pirate ship, and it was kind of an adventure kind of environment that we invite the kids into. And what they found out was that the kids considered it now playtime instead of something scary that was being done to them. And the kids loved it so much that that basically only 10% had to be sedated, and they had much better results in terms of experience. And I see here there was a comment. Let me just open my chat. Sorry, Joel is saying, hi Chris, staff refresh. I'm not sure what that is about.
Sorry, Chris. Yeah, I got 5 minutes more. Otherwise, we got to answer some questions. So
yeah, sure. Very good. So maybe to kind of wrap this up, you can say, as an example, GE Healthcare used design thinking to come up with a much more impactful solution based on really having this empathy. And if they hadn't had this empathy, they would never have thought of the pirate universe and kind of getting into a child's world that would actually create huge financial returns for GE Healthcare, but also a hugely improved customer experience for parents and kids. So in summary, you can say that design thinking helps you stay relevant in a fast-changing world, and the way that you can do that is basically in 5 simple steps that I'll share with you now, and then we can get into the Q&A. Basically, the first thing I would do if I were you and you wanted to improve something in your business, whether it's your own business or you're working for someone, or it could even be maybe in your family or in the church, could be to find users. Don't assume that you know what they feel. Find them, talk to them, ask open-ended questions, and listen to what they're saying and write it down. Do that with 5 to 7 users. You don't need to talk to that many users as long as it's the right kind of demographic. If you have many different demographics, you may need to speak to 5 to 7 from each of your top 2 or 3 demographics for about half an hour, something like that, 45 minutes. Maybe visit them where they want to use your services, or visit them at their home or their work to really understand the environment. identify what their challenges are and why do they come to church, for example. Why do you go to the hairdresser? Why do you want to go out and eat? Is it just about the food, or is there something else you're looking for? Then generate a volume of ideas and try to think go crazy pretty much. Really think broad. How would the Disneyland solve this, or Legoland solve this problem? How would the special forces solve it? How would a homeless person solve it, or a billionaire solve it? So really think in creative ways, first without any limitations, and then select the ideas that are most desirable and most interesting to explore. Make those ideas visual very quickly. You can use post-it notes, anything, a cup, tape, suddenly this is a mobile phone. Anything that looks like a solution is enough to test it. And that's the next step, and the final step that I'll show you here is really, again, go out and find users and test it with 5 to 7 users, and really ask questions. Don't try to sell it to them, but notice how they would use your solution. What is it that's missing? What could be better? What is confusing? What else? Because when they see something tangible, they would be able to give you much better feedback than if you send them a survey. Many companies do these kind of surveys because it's easy to do, or sometimes focus groups interviews. But what's missing often from these is it's out of the context where people use it. And in the social dynamic with many people, you are not likely to volunteer your most vulnerable feelings and thoughts. So it's better to do these tests one-to-one. So now you kind of seen how important empathy is in this situation, and how it could be important also in your career, or for your company, for your customers. You've gotten a quick fire here, summary of what is design thinking. Normally we spend a couple of days teaching this stuff, so this is really the short CV kitchen version. And I've given you a few kind of key steps that you can use to get started. Perhaps if you can share your emails in the chat, then we could also send this deck to you. But this was kind of a quick summary. I'm really grateful for the opportunity to be invited here to share with you. I hope you will find that design can help you with some of the many challenges we have in the world to make business and life better. And I invite all of you to connect with me if you want to stay in touch. I'm sharing a lot on LinkedIn on what we're doing and what other interesting people are doing. So there's a QR code. If you take your mobile phone up, you can connect with me there. It's also included in the deck that we'll be sending out. So now we can have a bit of Q&A, and I know, Joel, you would be helping kind of moderate this, so I will just exit the slides.
Yes. Thank you so much, Chris. Yeah, that's a lot of stuff there, and if you can show our slide. So if you've got any questions, you can still drop it at the link at tiny.cc/askwater, and that will be good. Yeah, that's the link. Or you can just drop your questions here. And Chris has so graciously said that he would give us his deck of slides. So that will be good. But we would like to ask a bunch of questions, and even as I go down these questions, if you've got more, please drop them either in the chat or here at the tiny.cc link. Right. So Chris, you're talking about clarifying people's needs and identifying their needs, and then going from that angle. So my question to you, well, probably an interesting question. I think at this point in time, people are actually not very sure of what their needs are. I mean, like, just for an example, I was on the phone with a couple of people earlier, and all they are focusing on is, number one, making sure that their business can kickstart. Number two, keeping in step with all the SOPs that have been set with by the government. You know, so that's all they can think about. It's right in front of their mind. So how do we help people identify what their own needs truly are?
Yeah, if you don't mind, I'll actually share, because I have a slide that shows that in a quite visual way. If you don't mind, I will just share it here. So you can say that at a high level, there's kind of two questions. The first one is, what problems are you trying to solve? What goals are you trying to achieve in your life? So maybe, for example, we heard before that people want to preserve cash and don't want to spend so much. So if we're trying to get their cash, how could we be high priority in their budget, right? The second is, so finding out what is it that is still considered a high priority for them. Maybe healthcare is still very important, for example. So figuring out through interviews, through observations, through metadata as well, what is it people care about would be one step. The second part is, even if people want the same thing as they wanted before, how can you make the experience of getting that thing more appropriate now? Because maybe I still want health, but I don't want to go out of the door, or I still want food, but I don't want to leave my house, or I still want entertainment, but I'm tired of Netflix, or whatever it is, right? So that's kind of maybe a high level way to think about it. You could maybe say, if you think about how you can find out, one is actually observation, right? So let's say we were observing this situation. What do you see here, right? It might be that you think, oh, I'm seeing someone who's about to get mugged, or it could be a couple that just had an argument and she's leaving him. But it could also be that it's someone calling her name, or she's about to turn around to ask for direction. So often observation can be difficult, and sometimes you need to validate what you think you're seeing. If you are, for example, observing a restaurant and how people are behaving in the restaurant today, being awkward, not giving handshake after meeting their uncle after so many months, or whatever. The next thing is you can actually try to do the thing that your user is trying to do. So don't assume that it's going to work now that you change the layout in the restaurant, for example. Actually try to log in as if you're a customer. So this person is actually a designer who's pretending to be disabled or different able, who is experiencing how easy or how difficult it is to move around in a city. So by trying to do something, you feel what it's like to do it. So that's another thing that you can do to kind of discover needs. And last can be basically asking and listening, asking very open-ended questions. And often, if we assume the answer people give is correct, let's say, I just want to save money. Sometimes you can actually ask a little bit deeper and say, why is that important to you? And what else is important to you? Or maybe instead of looking for opinions, you can ask for stories. So tell me about a time where you were trying to save money. How has that affected your spending? What did you do last week when you went shopping? What did you put in the cart? Or you could even go to the supermarket and kind of stalk people and see what they're putting in cart and say, hey, we're doing some user research. Would you mind telling me a little bit on, do you shop here often? Is it you as a man that's normally shopping in the family? I know a lot of men had to learn to shop suddenly and understand their wife's shopping list. Right? So it's actually looking for stories with evidence in real life of what people are actually doing, because sometimes people are saying one thing, they're saying they want to save money, but the next moment they're actually online gambling or buying a luxury camera from Japan. Right? So sometimes stories can be a way to find these contradictions that we have as human beings. So I don't know if that answered the question.
That's a practical way of understanding design thinking, and also in terms of understanding the needs of people. Basically, I think in summary, just get into their shoes and walk in their shoes a bit. We've got more questions, and I think a more practical question is, so you've talked a bit about design thinking in terms of creating solutions or maybe products and services. But I've got a question here. How do you enable empathy or design thinking, not just personally or for the individual, but for the whole team or the whole company? Yeah, is there a way to scale it for the whole company?
That's a great question. I guess you can say that to some extent, I'll also show a slide for that. You can think of it this way, that you have now, all of you heard about design thinking and may have like an initial idea what it is. I would probably encourage you to buy a book, take some online learning, or ask your HR in your company to maybe provide some e-learning or a course. We can certainly help if there's a need, to kind of deepen your own understanding and try it out really quickly. Try some of the steps out here, because it's not rocket science, but of course there is a bit of mastery in any new thing that you're doing. Second would be ideally for organizations to begin having teams that are all understanding this language and can use this to make it easier to come up with new solutions, right? So for example, today I spoke with someone in a big logistics company that were looking for, they were sales enablement, so they help salespeople sell. So they wanted to upskill their sales enablement function to be better at helping the salespeople. And they wanted to use design thinking for that, right? So you can say once the whole team has this way of working, it's a lot easier than if it's only one person. And ideally, you can say that it should be brought out organization-wide for all the functions where design occurs: marketing, IT, HR, product, finance, etc. All the spaces where these kind of decisions are being made. It may not be the cleaners, might not need it, right? But at least the key functions. Yeah. So that could maybe give you a little bit of an idea how to do that. You can also think of it as kind of a journey from kind of having business as usual, not really knowing what the design and customer experience is about, to beginning to have some initial buy-in, maybe in senior management. Maybe you need the owner of the business or the C-suite to be on board, have your sponsor in place. Then maybe rolling out some learning initiatives, beginning to actually apply it in real projects, beginning to see the ROI, that things are getting better, we're selling more, customers are happier. And that's when it becomes kind of just how we do things around here. And people would be upset if you were about to start a project and you didn't talk to any customers, or if you hadn't built a prototype and tested it first, no one would want to spend money on it. So that could maybe kind of give you a feel.
All right, thanks, Chris. I think this particular slide explains it very well, and it gives clarity. And by the way, thanks all for dropping your emails, because yeah, we'll be getting the deck of slides from Chris. Thank you so much again, Chris. Chris, earlier you mentioned you should read some books about design thinking. So I mean, maybe you've got a reading list, but maybe just for the sake of this discussion, what is one book that you would recommend to enable ourselves to understand a bit more about design thinking? Or if there's a thought leader in the forefront of design thinking, who is it? Like, yeah.
I mean, there are many, so it depends a little bit what you want to use it for, I would say, and kind of at what level you're at already. We can maybe I'll suggest we just send a few titles together with the slide deck. There's one called the Design Thinking Playbook that's quite easy to use. There's some more around, you can say, what you talked about, the kind of how do you implement this in organizations. There's one called Creative Confidence by the Kelly brothers, who are some of the people kind of shaping the design thinking as we know it today. So those could be some examples, but I'll be happy to share.
All right, thanks, Chris. I've got another question. So in this whole thought about design thinking, this whole process of design thinking, a lot of it is understanding the user experience, understanding the user's needs, and how we can best help them. So this is a skill question. How do we learn to ask good questions and ones that will point us to the real answers that we are looking for? Is there a basic idea for that?
Yeah, you attend a training with Human Inc. No, but I would say again back to invest in your own learning, right? Is one. I think actually empathy is something we all have capacity for. We all have empathy if we see someone who's hurt. If we learn that some of our friends, I learned today that a friend of mine's relative had passed away, right? We all can feel like, oh, I remember what it's like when I lost my relative, right? So I think we all have a deeply innate human capability to have empathy. There are, of course, interviewing techniques that are more effective and some that are less effective. So some of the key principles is basically kind of 80-20. So it should be the other person. Let's say you're interviewing me, then I should be speaking 80% of the time, and you should maximum be speaking 20% of the time. Probably a good idea to understand before you waste your time or my time. Know what you want to learn, but also stay open to what you didn't know you needed to learn. So on the one hand, know what you're looking for. I definitely want to know about Chris's budget for food, but I'm also curious about what else is he spending money on, or how does he make his decisions in life? Who else influences his what's in his fridge? Maybe my wife, etc. Right? Or maybe what my mother taught me in terms of Danish food. So actually looking for those. So look for stories is another one that I would say is key. Tell me about a time when you. When was the last time? How do you normally do it? Another powerful way can be to actually ask, could you show me how? Can I join you next time you're doing that? Could I spend a day with you or 2 hours with you when you're doing that thing? Because maybe when I'm talking about it 3 months later, I will kind of pick up the things I can remember, and I will maybe omit the most interesting things that you would have noticed because you're curious and trying to understand. So I think those are some of the key questions. Also maybe not assuming you understand when someone says something. So for example, I once interviewed a young professional in a bank, and he said that his main goal was to get promoted. And I said, so I could assume, yeah, everybody wants to get promoted, right? But then I asked, well, so why do you want to get promoted? Oh, because I want a higher salary. Again, I could assume, of course, everybody wants a higher salary. But I said, so how come it's important for you right now to get a higher salary? And he said, well, I want to buy a house. And again, I could assume, well, of course, everybody wants to buy a house. He was living with his parents. So I said, so why is it important for you to buy a house? Well, there's this girl that I'm dating and I'm planning to ask her father for her hand, but unless I can show that I have a nice house, I'm not sure he's going to agree, right? So suddenly we had a kind of a Bollywood, Hollywood kind of story unfolding, right? So suddenly we understood why it was so important for him that his boss liked him. Right. So it's kind of getting a little bit deeper beyond the surface is often what's important. And that's true empathy. That's how you know your friends. That's how you know your family. What if you knew your customers that way? What if you understood your boss that way? What if you understood those difficult folks in the other department that always create problems? What if you understood them from a human level, like a brother or a sister?
Right. Thanks for that, Chris. Yeah, you did mention that, in empathy, it is understanding the person's emotions. So you shared this simple example. If you've got someone who, a friend of yours who's got a friend, another friend or relative who's passed away, so you understand that emotion. You know that, okay, this person is feeling sad. This person is grieving. For example. So you may understand the emotion or the feeling that they are going through, but you may not fully understand the experience they're going through. I mean, their relative is not your relative. That
exactly.
relationship is going to be different from your late relative. That kind of thing. So how do we deal with empathy, having similar emotions but different experiences? How best do we deal with that?
Well, that's a very tough question, and I love it. I think you can say in the sense that it's a bit like if you're a counselor or a psychologist, if you don't understand yourself as a human being and your own emotions, it becomes harder to relate to other people. So the more you can say advanced language you develop for emotions, the easier it is to talk about it. If I don't know what it means to feel estranged in a new country, then if you tell me that you're estranged, I wouldn't understand it, right? So there are some tools that we use in design thinking for this. There's kind of an inventory of needs, which are human needs, which a bit like the Maslow hierarchy of needs. You have basic needs and all the way up to self-realization and so on. So you can use structures like that to define which questions you want to ask. Or even as someone is talking, you can kind of say, oh, he's talking about safety. He's feeling scared of being in the restaurant. Or he's talking about it doesn't feel the same anymore. So he's looking for joy and delight. Or he's actually not going out to eat. He's going out because he's looking to get gossip from his friends. He hasn't seen them forever. And how's it going with your family, right? So I think there's some tools you can use for this, and there's an element of it which is about again asking and listening deeply, right? I saw a sad example today on Facebook, where someone had locally here had shared a kind of racist post, basically about Indians being drunk and killing people, but thankfully Malaysians are so nice they don't start a riot, right? A very sad thing, right? But the person then answered this question, which is of course very sensitive, saying that, well, actually, if we meet this person with anger and hatred, we're only going to make things worse, right? And he shared a story where he had been traveling with a African person who's a super peaceful, successful business person in a car here in Malaysia, and there was a roadblock. And he said 100 meters before the roadblock, his friend who's the African, basically said, we're going to get pulled over now. And he said, no, why do you think that? Because I'm black. He said, nah, don't worry. It's not like that in Malaysia. And true enough, they got pulled over, and the police not just pulled them over, but went through the entire car and frisked them and so on. And he said that happens every time the police see me, right? So what my friend had basically learned from this was, you cannot assume that your world map is other people's world map, that your reality is their reality. And it's easy to judge someone who is being racist. It's easy to judge someone who is acting out of anger. But we didn't live that person's life. We didn't have that person's parents. We don't have that no budget or low budget, right? So I guess that is also much in line with what the church is teaching, I'm sure, and what Christianity is about.
Yeah, true. Yeah, thanks for that. Yeah, it's a lot more. Yeah, and it's just asking a lot of questions and don't assume. And I like what you said earlier. Yeah, ask questions, and you talk only 20% of the time, but let the other person do the 80% of the talking. So I mean, this could be a psychology or a counseling type of thing, but I mean, it works in business, and I think Chris has proven that to us, that it truly does work in business. Maybe something from your personal experience of design thinking, Chris. So in what you've learned and what you've experienced dealing with clients, dealing with people, going through this process of design thinking, what has been the most difficult step of the whole design thinking process? So I mean, it starts with empathy, right? But all the way till implementation. So what's the toughest part for you?
Great question. Maybe what I'll do to make it a bit more interesting is actually engage our audience again. So maybe I'm happy to share, but first I want to hear something for something, right? So of the 3 steps, understand, ideas, and action, which one do you guys think is most common or most difficult and maybe done not so much in your organizations or in business and in work? Is it understand that is most common or most difficult? Is it ideas that is most common or most difficult to get by? Or is it taking action that is most common or most difficult? So Calvin says understand is, and Calvin, is that the hardest one or the easiest one? Action, just means, and is that, so maybe write hardest or easiest also. Calvin is saying hardest, so understand is the hardest. Yeah. Calvin, why do you think that's the case? Maybe you could share a bit. And Christine says action is the hardest. So it might vary from organization to organization or even individual or team. Puching says action. Gaps between understand ideas is missing. Yeah. So you have many ideas, but you don't take action, right? So there are in a way barriers for all 3, right? Do we have time to talk to users? Wouldn't it be easier to just get some ideas? Now that we have some ideas, shouldn't we just take action and not test it first? So there are in a way barriers for all 3, I would say. What we typically see is organizations are fairly good at taking action, especially the usual action. New action is another story, right? So doing the same old thing that we can do, but doing something new we take forever. So working from home is a great example. Organizations have been talking about this for donkey years, right? And suddenly with the lockdown, it was do or die, right? So suddenly everybody could figure out how to work from home with 0 preparation, no change management plan, 0 plan at all. Right? So this is also showing that we have a potential as humans to act when we really care about something or when we really need to make something happen. And the wonder could be to say, what if we could evoke that kind of ability to take agile action more often in our lives, not just at work, to change our house, to change our community, to change situation for poor refugees in Malaysia, or whatever it may be. From an understand standpoint, do we spend the time it takes to listen to someone at work? Or do we only connect for the work calls? Or do we also actually ask about how are you, how's your family, what's your career dreams, how are you feeling about the project, right? And from getting ideas, are we open to other people's ideas or only our own? And do we know techniques to also get many ideas, maybe also from non-colleagues, maybe from customers or students or startups in Finland, or whoever we should talk to get more ideas. So that might give kind of a little bit of a feel that each of these have some blockers and some drivers, I guess, that you can unlock. And the more you practice it, the better you get at it. So maybe if you know individually, I'm pretty good with ideas, maybe you want to focus more on actually understanding other people and not just listening to your own thoughts. Or maybe you know you're the sort of person who write down ideas late at night, but you never get to take action on it. So maybe just do that one thing you can do right now or tomorrow.
All right, thanks for that, Chris. Yeah, maybe you can leave this slide. This is the whole design thinking process, and based on the chat, everybody is having struggles at different points of time. So I mean, so I guess for everyone and every situation, the struggle will come in at a different point of time. And, you know, it's going to be different for everyone, and it's up to us to understand the different situations. Um,
Absolutely.
we've just got a couple of minutes left. Okay, there's someone here who's asking a question,
Yeah.
but maybe I'm gonna ask this person's question, and then Chris, maybe you could summarize.
Yes.
So the question goes, am I correct to assume that this design thinking is fundamentally a combination of user interface, user experience, lean, agile, and Scrum model, digital marketing and data analysis, and branding, storytelling with empathy, something like Apple? Is that a good way to put it together, or do you have a summary of design thinking for yourself?
I think actually it's maybe not so important. I'm not so big on definitions in that sense, because I think if that's what it means to you, that's fantastic. I think in essence, design is about making things better, and all of the things you mentioned can make things better. Of course, there's some, you can say, idea history in terms of which concepts were involved by who, when, and how have they now kind of converged and come together. So you can say that design thinking is built on a few different practices like ethnography, psychology, especially business psychology, creativity, research about creativity and science around creativity and innovation, product design, even architecture. So they have pulled from many business as well, of course. So there are many of the practices that have familiarity. If any of you have been through business school or MBAs, you will notice some similarities in language. User journeys are also used in Lean. Lean was mentioned, Lean Six Sigma. Agile is a way to build quickly, which is also iterative. So Agile and design thinking share many of the same values. Design thinking is more about discovering unmet needs and testing them very quickly. Agile is about building quickly, you can say. So Agile will help you, once you know what to build, you can build it faster and keep learning as you're building. Design is more about discovering what to build in the first place. So that could be a way to think of it, and absolutely correct. It can be applied in marketing, IT, HR, strategy. It can be applied for your upcoming wedding or celebrating your child's 18th birthday or whatnot. So as a summary, I would say I hope that you found it useful. I hope that you will start with the empathy, start with the heart first, and happy to connect with you on LinkedIn if you have any questions applying it or whatnot. If I can help in any light form, more than happy to. And if there's a deeper need, then maybe we need to talk with in a more professional sense, but that's certainly also possible. So really grateful for the opportunity to share here tonight, Joel and SK and everyone. Thanks for that. And it's been a very professionally run webinar, I must say, way better than many of our corporate partners.
Thank you so much, Chris. We would love to hear more from you and more about this whole idea of design thinking. I truly like what you said. It starts from the heart, right? I think me being a man, it's hard to understand that. I'm not in touch with my emotions. So my wife says, but it is. It is something for us to learn. But actually, that is the best way, the most effective way to come with effective solutions for the problems our customers, our clients, etc. So thank you so much again, Chris. Thank you for joining us. We are truly grateful that you're able to join us and share a lot of your experience. I'm sorry that you had to kind of run through your slides, but you're sharing that with us, right? So thanks again. So do drop your email addresses in the chat, and then we will compile all of them. And then I believe Chris and his team would love to send us this chat. And with that, we have come to the end of our COVID-19 survival series.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Chris. And for those of you who have joined us, for everyone, congrats to you. You've come to the end. Hopefully, our CMCO will be lifted by next week, and things would be better. But next week we will continue with our Biz Talk here at Workplace at the River. And we're going to have the group COO of Reapfield Properties, Jonathan Lee, who's going to be talking about leading in the midst of uncertainty. So come and hear Jonathan, even as he talks about the real estate industry and how he has been a leader in this industry and how he leads in the midst of uncertainty. So do sign up at the link. Places are limited. But just one thing to highlight, we are going to start an hour earlier because we've noticed that it is possibly better for you an hour earlier. So do sign in earlier at 7 p.m. All right. So do join us for our talk and see you next week. Tomorrow we've got a very interesting talk as well by our director, Dr. Wong Sam Keong, who is a fellow with OCA. If you've heard of Ravi Zacharias, the late Ravi Zacharias, I believe he just passed away last week. He's part of the Arzim Ministries, and he's going to conduct a talk tomorrow. Why do bad things happen to good people? So if you'd like to join in, do sign in and drop your name at the link, register at the link, and hear more about why do bad things happen to good people. And that's happening tomorrow via Zoom as well. And thank you all for joining us. If you'd like to connect with us at the team here in Workplace at the River, do drop us your details. This is kind of like dropping your business card at the end of a networking event. So do drop your contact details and we will get in touch with you. Do share your industry, some of your interests, or if you have any needs that you have, we will do our best to fill those needs. Other than that, thank you so much for joining us this evening. And this is our final COVID-19 survival series. Next week, we will have our Biz Talk as usual. So see you next week. My name is Joel. I'm part of the team. Glad to have you. Goodbye. Good night.